What's up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be looking at the various types of contracts and documents that you need to run your restoration company. These are all the things that we ran at my company: work authorization, reconstruction agreement, credit card guarantee, tick sheets, moisture logs, limited scope mold waiver, all that jazz. Basically, if you own a restoration company, you're not going to want to miss this video. Let's go. As we go through this, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to walk you through this. I'm not an attorney, and I don't pretend to be one. These are things that I ran at my own company, and I did have an attorney help me put these things together, and so they are legit. Just know this: you should take anything that I show you and run it by your own attorney. And if you guys want a free copy of all this stuff, go to workwithshane.com, and I'll tell you how we give this to clients that come into our 30-day test drive for free, just for trying, okay? Let's share my screen and let's talk about the very first one. This is going to be the reconstruction agreement. When would we use the reconstruction agreement? Let's start there. This is going to be number one, when it's just that. It's a reconstruction agreement. Maybe there was an insurance job and you're going to do a work authorization to do the dry out, okay, the emergency service repairs, and we're going to do the reconstruction agreement for any of the recon, okay? And here's the bigger distinction, I think, between that. In the event that you're doing emergency services work authorization, you don't have an estimate, okay? In a reconstruction agreement, we're going to be presenting an estimate. That's going to be one of the big differences between the two. Anytime we're going to be presenting an estimate before we get started, that's when I'm going to use the reconstruction agreement. The two examples are reconstruction. They've had water damage or fire. That would be a reconstruction agreement. And the second case would be roofing, oddly enough. Why do we do roofing? Partly because we have language in our contract that would basically state this: once we write this thing, and once we come to an agreement and we're good on the scope of work and the price with the insurance company, you're going to pay us that money and we're doing this work, okay? And now in some states, they've told me, oh, you can't do that, it's not legal. Well, guess what? Speeding is illegal too, and y'all all probably do that. I'm just telling you this is what we did. I'm not telling you to do it, okay? But if we wrote an estimate or a scope of repairs, we were gonna make sure that we were contracted with that person, and then they were going to hire us, okay? And if they did not use us, there was going to be a penalty otherwise. That's how we did it. And we were very straightforward with this. We would tell them up front, okay? But we always wanted to make sure, hey, if we go through this trouble, you're going to be paying us this. And if you break it, this is going to be the penalty. And we had that in there. I'll show you that too. But the first thing I want to show you first and foremost is those are the distinctions between the two. Those are the distinctions. The reason why we put that stuff in there in terms of the language is this: if you don't have that language in there, and if you don't have that conversation with your client, there were many cases to where we would do a roof inspection, they would get the claim, they'd get the check, and we would never hear from them again. We would have to go out there, meet with the adjuster, haggle back and forth, and that's a lot of white collar time that we spend in that, and we want to get paid for that. In those cases, we weren't protected. Same thing happens on a reconstruction agreement. On a $50,000, $80,000 recon, you go out there, you're scoping it multiple trips. It takes a lot of time to write it. It takes a lot of time to negotiate it, etc. That's the reason why we put that in there. Once you get hung on a few of those things, you'll start putting this language in there, and that's really what we did, okay? So this is what our reconstruction agreement is. We called it emergency service contract for reconstruction. Let me say this first and foremost. If you ever have a problem and you ever have to go to court, okay, because you and your customer ain't seeing eye to eye and there's a problem, I want you to know this. I'm not saying these contracts are perfect. It doesn't matter which contract you have, baby. You can go hire the best attorney in the world. If you have someone that doesn't think they owe you money, they're going to go hire an attorney. That attorney is going to find problems with your contract no matter what. I'm just sharing that with you. That being said, some of the things we made tweaks along the way to try and, I guess, sew up some of the holes in some of our verbiage. So one of the things is we would put emergency service contract for reconstruction. And the reason why we did that, from what I remember, we couldn't exactly call it a contract by itself because there was no price put in this. And technically in our state, and probably in several other states, you needed a price before it could be considered a contract. So our solution is where I don't recall. We just named it this. I can't remember exactly the reason why, but it worked, okay? And it's an emergency service contract for reconstruction. We're not trying to pull a fast one on anybody either. Like, if they think there's a chance they don't want us to do the work, we're not gonna go through the trouble of scoping that thing out, okay? And we would always present the work authorization first before we did this, okay? But I just want you to know the two cases is either going to be reconstruction or repairs after some type of insurance loss and or roofing. And so we would just put this together. If we would call it an order for construction of services. And this is the actual copy that we give you guys if you come in our program. You just change this out for your own company name, and then you can just take it to your attorney and say, hey, is this good? And let's see, your subcontractors. We had to put this clause in there too, because when we were doing reconstruction, at some point we didn't have something about subcontractors in there, and then they were kind of saying, oh, you didn't do all the work, etc. So you got to have a subcontractor clause in there. Pricing, we put xactimate or equivalent in here because we did use xactimate for a long time and then eventually got off and developing our own that we use in QuickBooks. And you guys can just pause this and read it on your own, okay? but we would basically say we would use xactimate or equivalent, and what we do is an industry standard, okay? So here was the one little trick that we put in here, that once the contractor writes the estimate and negotiates the claim with the insurance company, and again, I know you guys may say,
well, you can't do that unless you're a public adjuster.
We're doing the work. Public adjuster's not doing the work. I'm the contractor doing the work, okay? There's a blatant difference. And I can just tell you this, I've done over 1,000 of these things and never had a problem. So I'm not telling you that you couldn't be accused of being a public adjuster, but that's not the intent, and we got paid and this worked. But that comment was for all you little PAs that jump out at me, okay? I'm not trying to be a PA, baby. I'm a contractor. There's a difference. Change the language any way you want, but here's what we told them. Gentleman's agreement. Once we come to an agreement with your carrier, okay, if you, for some reason, choose not to use us, the customer agrees to pay 20% of the gross amount of the claim to the contractor as compensation for professional services and administration fees. I'm just telling you, we put this in our contract, okay? And we did have to go to court, and we had people pay us at 20%. Now, I can't remember if the judge paid us the 20%. I don't think we even had to, because these people knew they signed a contract stating there was a 20% clause in there. And we would actually present that to them as well. We'd be like, listen, now, if you want us to do this work, if we don't reach an agreement, we're not gonna do the work. So you're not on the hook, okay? But if we do reach an agreement, you're paying us, baby, straight up, right? And we would use the analogy like one of two things might happen. Either A, Jesus calls you to go to heaven because you got hit by a train, or B, you won the lottery, the Powerball, you got $50 billion, and I never see you again. If either one of those two situations happen, I want 20%. And I'm just telling you, it works. Even if you don't execute that in court, have that conversation with your customer and just tell them what that's gonna be. And I think that's the reason why we got it paid in the cases where it was broke, because they straight up knew, and we mutually, two adults, agreed to that. Here's another one. Assignment of benefit and direct payment authorization. Here's another one you guys are gonna go crazy. AOB, no AOB. Let me tell you about what we use the AOB for. In my view, some of the guys use the AOB and they were misrepresenting the AOB, I guess. They were trying to get the assignment of benefits of the policy toward the contractor, and they would sue the carrier so they could get the money for the job. That was not the intent of why we even had the AOB. It was really more of this. Once the check is cut, we want the ability to endorse our client's name and put it in the bank. That was really it, and get a direction of payment. That's why we put that in there. We didn't put the AOB in there so we could sue the carrier on behalf of the customer. We would just do it so we could handle the check and put it directly into our account. To be very, very clear, if our customer did not pay us, we would sue them, not the carrier. Are we clear? If they didn't pay us, we would sue them, not the carrier. Our contract is with our customer. So for whatever that's worth, that's what my belief on the AOB is. Have it written any way that you want, okay? And if you guys want me to get on there and I can go get some attorneys and we can talk about it, we can debate back and forth. If y'all want, drop a comment and I'll go get a big restoration attorney and we can do this on one of these videos here. Nonetheless, I'm just telling you, if they don't pay your bill, you're going after the customer, you're not gonna sue State Farm. Don't sue State Farm, you ain't gonna win. But anyway, that's why we would put the AOB, and notice that's why it says direction of payment authorization. Okay, and it just basically states that we can sign the thing and put it in our name. So basically, all this other stuff is pretty standard. If you guys want anything else, you can just like pause it and put it all together. But like, this is kind of what our contract would say. The other thing that we put in there, where is it? The attorney's fee provision. You need to have an attorney's fee clause in there. We didn't have that for a while. And then, so we didn't get paid it. And then we put it in, and then we did get paid. So anyway, that's the Reconstruction agreement. Hopefully that's helpful. If you got questions, drop a comment and let me know. Let's go to the next one. So this is our work authorization. When will we use our work authorization? Emergency services like water damage. Another one might be if there's a tree on a house, okay, storm damage, I would have them sign a work authorization and a Reconstruction agreement, okay? I would have them do both. In most of those cases, I'm probably gonna hire the arborist out of my work authorization because I don't know the price for that work. And maybe I pay him directly. There's many different ways you can skin that cat, okay? I'm just saying, emergency services, we gotta do it now. We don't know what it's gonna cost. That's gonna be your work authorization. That's gonna be your work authorization. And then if you're going to maybe do the repair to the rafters, the plywood, and a new roof, that's gonna be Reconstruction. There are many cases where I'd have them sign both. And here's what I would tell you. If you don't know, get them to sign both. So we would call this one emergency service contract and work authorization. Really, this one was pretty simple too. We put the subcontractor clause in there too, because we eventually started leaning on subcontractors to maybe help us with demolition. If you do that, make sure you've got this in here, okay? Same thing with the pricing. We would put this in there that we would actually bill the company as a courtesy to you, but if we don't receive payment, it's your baby, it's your bill, okay? Another cool one is the equipment usage. So sometimes you'll have a situation where they'll be like, hey, well, I don't want to pay for 4 days or 3 days. I want to pay for 2.5 or 3.5 or whatever. So we put the equipment usage in there, and it was basically said this. Sometimes they would say it only needed it for 2 days. It wasn't that wet. So we would say, hey, They're all 3-day rentals no matter what. And if it's on there any minute, it's an entire 24 hours of that day. Okay. So we put that in there and we didn't have any problem with it. That's a good one to put in there. The assignment of benefits, direct pay authorization, the same thing happens there and the other definitions. And I think we put the attorney's provision in here too. I hope we did. Yeah. And there's G there as well. So those are the biggest things I would say different, right? And there's antimicrobial clauses in there saying, hey, you're gonna allow us to put this stuff in there, etc. But basically, this is your work authorization. This is what we're gonna do for your mold, for your mitigation stuff. If you don't have a price right off bat, if you're gonna come to a firm price before you do any work, then I'd go to the Reconstruction agreement. And if you don't know, have them do both. That'd be the better way to say it. Any questions, drop a comment and let me know. Subcontractor agreement. You need a subcontractor agreement. And this is pretty simple. And this basically states, hey, this is your formal document where you have this thing set up with every subcontractor, and you guys need this. You just need to put this together. If you ever have a problem and a subcontractor decides to sue one of your clients, like this will help protect you, okay? Just have them sign this before you do the first job with them. I'll go through the checklist in just a minute, okay? But this basically just states that they're a subcontractor for you and it makes everything formal. There are some special conditions in here. We tell them what insurance they've got to have, etc. Again, so talk to your insurance agent about the requirements that they should have, and then you can update this with that, okay? But you're gonna wanna put this stuff in there. That's what you're gonna do for your subcontractor agreement. Again, if you guys want to know more, go to workwithshane.com. Here's the subcontractor checklist. This one's pretty important too. This is like the cover letter to that. You're gonna need their W-9. The master subcontractor agreement, that's the one that we just looked at. And then work agreements, we would always tell them that we were gonna do certain work orders on everything. So I would tell you to do that. Give them formal work orders when you send them out to go do something, especially for reconstruction or repairs. If it's gonna be like some type of one-off day rate thing for temp labor on the mitigation, that's kind of a different animal, okay? But it's still a good idea to have that whole thing set up ahead of time, okay? We would always pay those guys a day rate regardless, but if it was gonna be any type of work order or repair, we would make sure that we told Philip that he was gonna do this at this address, and this was the scope of work, and this is how much he was getting. And he had that before we ever hired him onto a job. And then you tell them if they wanna get paid, they have to do these things here. Like, this is just really good stuff to have, okay? You need to have this stuff. A certificate of completion, we do it in 2 cases. It was primarily more often done in reconstruction so you could recover depreciated funds. So let's say it's a $20,000 reconstruction job. It's not uncommon for them to only issue 12 grand of the 20, and 8 of that would be withheld until you present a certificate of completion. And that means you've done all the work and the customer signed off on it that it's done, and then you turn that into the carrier, and then they'll release the remaining depreciated funds. So that's the primary purpose in which you would have that, okay, is for receiving depreciated funds. The other situation that you might have is just more of a certificate of satisfaction, certificate of completion, certificate of satisfaction. They're called the same thing, COS, COC, very similar. So if you've heard one, they're essentially saying, hey, we did it, they're happy, we're done, boom, okay? The other situation where we'd use the certificate of completion for a dry out would really be more so they could say, hey, they didn't have a question that it is dry, okay? And if they do have a question, when you get that thing signed, that's when they're gonna ask you, okay? So asking them to sign their certificate of completion, if they had a question, that's when they're gonna sign it. If they don't sign it, you know you got a problem, you need to figure that problem out so you can work through it. If they do sign it, then that's them saying, hey, yes, it's good, it's dry, we agree that it's dry and we're good. Those are good to have as well, okay, certificate of completion. So what's an example of a limited scope waiver? These are not meant to get you in trouble or anything else, okay? There's gonna be cases though, someone's gonna ask you or need you or want you to do something outside of what your normal protocol might be. And there's cases where it's gonna be okay and there's cases where it's not. That's all I'm saying, because I don't know what your scenario is. And I didn't come to this video like with an exact example, but it was gonna be something to the effect of this. Like, let's say maybe they had a leak and they had a door open and like a couple gallons of rainwater came in from outside, and they also had the window open and there was like 20 gallons inside because the window was open, and 1 or 2 gallons came in from outside from the ground. Technically, that would be considered all Cat 3 most likely, okay, because you've got dirty water mixing with clean water, and if they don't have flood coverage, like, I probably wouldn't demo the entire thing, okay? Like, I might treat that as a Cat 1. That's an example. It may not be the best example, but I'm trying to give you an illustration of an example where that might be. Another example, so let's say that maybe you've got a cabinet, okay, and you've got mold, and technically, per the S520, I think you're supposed to go 2 or 3 feet beyond the last visible piece of mold, okay? So let's say that it's supposed to be 2 feet beyond. It's 24 inches. You can only see 23 3/4 inches, okay? Like, technically, you need to pull that cabinet in order to verify that that last 1/4 of an inch was all clean and dry and free of mold. Does that make sense? Like, that's an example where you might have them sign that, be like, hey, we can't quite see this. You sign off on this. It appears to be good. You understand, you agree. okay? Or another one might be this. This is a better example, actually. A cabinet may be affected, and you might normally remove the cabinet to verify that the plywood below it is dry, or you might normally cut the bottom of the cabinet to verify it's dry. Maybe you can't reach it. You might say, hey, we think it's dry. It should be, okay, but we can't get the actual reading. So we have two options. Either A, pull the cabinet out, check the reading, or B, leave the cabinet there, dry for an extra day, and just, you sign this waiver and say that we're good. Another example might be like, you might normally wrap a couch with plastic and you charge $80 to wrap it. They might say, do not wrap that thing, just move it, okay? And like, this is them saying, okay, if it gets damaged, that's not our baby, we always wrap it. That's probably a better example. Moisture logs. So these are our moisture logs. We've changed this. It says GPP, so I've actually changed this here to now. If you guys get them now, this will actually say goal, because GPP is irrelevant. You don't even need that there. You need temperature, relative humidity, moisture content, and then the drying goal. But this is really all that we would have, okay? We would have the affected areas, and then the temp, relative humidity, moisture content, and then the drying goal. If you guys want to come in our ecosystem, we give you a free set. The next one will say drying goal from there. And all you do, you gather what day it was. And like, this is why I say you don't need a big fancy software, dude. A Google Sheet is just fine. You can print it out. I mean, Google Sheets is free. You just create a Gmail account, right? It's free and it works. And we can give you this copy of this template. And we did well over 1,000 claims, okay? And this is what we use, that's it. So that's our moisture logs. You just put in what day, and you put in the temperature, the relative humidity, the moisture content, and what is the goal. When the moisture content reaches the goal, you're done. Scope sheet. This is another one. The way that we wound up doing in the end was different, but if you guys are using Xactimate, this will be helpful for you. It's got a lot of the codes on there as well, but it will have the water, extract, WA, right on, or water claw, and this would tell you what room you did it in, and you can just kind of put in the square footage and those things, okay? We also had set and pull. Like, again, you don't need some big fancy software to track, did your gear get pulled offsite or not? Like, literally, when you set a piece 1184, you put set, and then when you pull 1184, put pull 1184. That's as simple as it can be. You can print this out and let the guys go out there with paper sheets, or you could just use an app like this, and that's what we would do, right? Is they would just fill this out digitally, just like this. Either way, it would work, okay? But this is an example of the tick sheet. I mean, it would just check all of these things. Ultimately, we wound up doing things differently because we wound up using the claim control method and using a muddy scope. I fundamentally changed the way that I believed on how you would report the work that you were going to do. And so we started doing that in the form of an estimate, and we didn't need the scope sheet the same way after that. But until you get there, this will do just fine for you, okay? Credit card guarantee. This is a good one. You need this credit card guarantee. When we present this, we've already had them sign the work authorization, okay? Once they sign the work authorization, that's actually got all the language that allows us to process the card on file, okay? This right here is where we actually gather the card number. That's why it's there, okay? And so get the work authorization time first, then you go to the credit card guarantee, and the language to process the cards in the document they've already signed, and then that's this one here. If you guys have problems getting them signed the thing, just go to workwithshane.com, and we've got some training that we could probably put you in through, but like, you need a credit card guarantee, and this is what it will look like. And then the mold waiver, limited scope mold waiver. So again, we already kind of touched on this one here. We would use this in a few situations. Number one, maybe they had $2,000 of coverage and your bill was going to be above and beyond that. You could use this here. I put limited cleaning cost. Maybe it was just a little bit of mold, 2 square feet, okay? And your protocol would be something bigger or better, like it was gonna make it $800, okay, to do the 2 square feet. They might say, hey, I just want you to do a couple pieces of that, and then this would just give us the ability to declare what we're gonna do and how we're gonna charge, okay? And again, the bigger thing with the mold that I would state would be this. There are certain people that don't have coverage for it, and they will allow you to do this, but they may not allow you to do that. The other examples, like I said, where maybe you can't see the full 2 or 3 feet that the S520 says, and so you maybe make an exception so you don't pull that cabinet. You're basically going on record telling them that you would normally do this, that are clearly electing not to do that. Another one might be like if they won't let you use the antimicrobial agents, like, or make them sign that too, all right? So that's what we would have them do in each one of these situations, each one of these cases. So these are the documents that we use. Those are the cases that we use them. If you have any questions, go to workwithshane.com. If you want to copy this stuff, go to workwithshane.com. We'll get on a call and we'll tell you about our 30-day program. We'll see you guys in the next video. Hey guys, if you enjoyed that video, I've got 3 things for you. Number 1, if you haven't yet, click on my face below and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Okay, we put out new content each and every week. Also, if you want me to help you grow your company, go to workwithshane.com. Workwithshane.com, put in your information, we can get on a call and see how we can help you grow your company. Lastly, there'll be some other videos right here. If you want to watch more content about growing your restoration company, check out one of these videos. We'll see you guys on the next one.